Welcome to this webinar of the BCS Consultancy Specialist Group. My name's Simon Wallace. I'm one of the committee members. With me on screen at the moment, we have Alan Moore. He is the chair of the Consultancy Specialist Group. And we have our two speakers, David Poole and Barry Turner. David and Barry, over to you.
Thank you, and thank you for the introduction, and a big thank you to BCS for inviting David and myself to present this evening. So what we're going to talk through is some objectives for the presentation, a quick look at our intros and bios, and then we'll be into the meat of the presentation. We'll look at key capabilities for an MSP. We'll look at the financial implications of selecting an MSP, the security implications that you need to think about, the types of risks you will see and need to navigate around when going through that process. We've got finally a decision framework to help you, which is designed as a takeaway and to generate some ideas for you as you move away and hopefully use and implement some of the ideas we talk about in the presentation. And then finally, any questions at the end. And please do contribute questions. It makes both mine and Davy's job much easier if we're responding to questions. The presentation is available as a download in PDF, and you will find at the back of the presentation there's lots of references and contact details for the two of us. So in terms of objectives, what we want to do this evening is simply provide you with a framework of ideas to enable you to make objective decisions on choosing which MSPs, and by MSPs I mean managed service providers, which ones to work with. So there's lots to think about. Public cloud has really changed that whole environment, and there's even more for you to think about than there was. So it's an area, as you'll see when we hit the bios, David and myself have spent an extensive amount of time working in the last 5 years. And then finally, to help David and myself, we'd like to get your feedback on your experience of engaging with cloud MSPs. Both of us are always really keen to get feedback from end users because it helps us in providing services to MSPs. So in terms of introductions, I've been working in the technology market now for 25 years. I have extensive experience working in service creation with telcos, with several technology providers. The last 6 years has been spent working with an organisation called ISSI. And that experience has been providing consulting and auditing processes for AWS, Microsoft and Oracle into the cloud MSP audience. And it's that 6 years of experience with working with cloud MSPs globally that's enabled David and myself to put tonight's presentation together, to give you a sort of number in terms of engagements. Over that period, I've clocked up 120 different engagements and worked with almost 90 different cloud MSPs and consultancies. David is a friend and colleague of many years standing, and for the last 6 years, David has been focused on a similar type of work to myself, and probably has more experience than I do, even in terms of the numbers of engagements. We feel confident we can cover any of the questions that may arise. The work that we're both self-employed consultants based in the UK. The work we do with cloud MSPs is done via an organisation called ISSI. ISSI are a US-based company based over on the West Coast, and they have contracts with AWS, Microsoft, Google, Oracle, to provide consult and auditing processes to their the managed service providers in their programs. Each of those companies I mentioned, so AWS, Microsoft, Oracle and Google, have an accredited program for cloud MSPs, and the intention of that accredited program is to ensure that those partners can provide a high level of customer experience and have the right expertise to provide the end client with the consultancy and services needed to provide a seamless experience when buying from a cloud MSP. The programs that ISSI provide fall into two parts. The first is each of those programs I mentioned for the 4 vendors require an audit of generally of 2 days, where the auditor takes the cloud MSP through a range of different processes to look at their technical, business and managed service capability. And it's in delivering that those audits that David and myself have gathered that expertise. The other part of the services that ISSI provide is consult services. And again, both David and myself have been heavily engaged in bringing partners of those 4 vendors who were not involved in cloud MSP activities, bringing them up to speed to be able to enter the market as a cloud MSP.
Before we move on to talking about the framework of the discussions and the requirements, we want to do the first poll, which was to basically find out the audience where you are in terms of using public cloud MSP or managed service providers. So, Simon, can we put the first poll up?
Okay, well, I think that's a fair sample. We're up to about 80% response there.
Great.
And so I will close that and share the results with you. There you go, if you can see that. So 63% not currently using, 19% currently evaluating services, 13% are using public cloud for some workloads, and 6% have exceeded 50%.
Okay, thanks very much for that. It's interesting. When we were looking at, what are the criteria that you can be using to evaluate the use of a public cloud managed service provider and what capabilities they should be offering, we're looking for a framework to think about that discussion or that thought process. We wanted to use the ITIL version 4 service value chain. So hopefully some of you or many of you are familiar with ITIL. It's been around for a long time. The version 4 was only fairly recently introduced, and it really focuses on sort of introducing and integrating things like DevOps and agile approaches to business. And an integral part of that is the service value chain. So how does somebody who's delivering IT services think about the process right the way through from planning out the framework of what they want to do, right the way through to engaging with the end users, building the requirements, designing, transitioning, delivering and supporting those services, and making sure that those services are delivering the value that were expected at the beginning of the engagement process. So what we've done is looked at all of these capabilities across the life cycle of the product development or the service value chain, and thought about what capabilities you should be looking for in each of those phases. So if we move on to the next slide, Barry. So when thinking about planning, what you're looking for is an MSP who's put together a well thought through structure of the services, the portfolios and capabilities they want to be able to deliver to the market across the life cycle of your use of public cloud. So they want to have a set of professional services and managed services to be able to engage with you in terms of working with you, working out what your requirements are. And because, as Barry said, the public cloud is moving so quickly, they should be the experts. They need to be the experts on the public cloud platforms, and they should be in a position to educate and train you and your users on how you can use the cloud most effectively. Whenever people are using public cloud, the most effective way of doing that is really stepping back and thinking about what you're trying to achieve. So a process ahead of time, before you even start thinking about what workloads are going to move, thinking about what is the strategy, what are you trying to achieve as a company. And partners, if they do a really good job, should be having that discussion with you about what's your strategy, what are you trying to achieve, what are your business and technology outcomes, and also how is that service delivery management going, what is it going to look like through the life cycle? So what sort of project management teams do they have? What sort of account managers, customer success teams? So what does all of that look like and in terms of engaging with you as a potential customer? And then going through design and transition, you need to be able to hopefully have experience of the workload. So, what type of workloads do you want to move to the cloud? What's the benefits of it? What's the challenges? How much experience have they got of doing that? And also we see applications either being re-platformed, so basically moving from sort of just standard infrastructure, having a platform as a service, or even net new applications modernized or designed so that they could really use the public cloud capabilities. So looking for partners who understand and can help you with that design and that transition planning, and then actually to move and migrate those workloads into the cloud. Hopefully they've got experience of doing that. You might only be moving a few workloads, but this should be something that they're doing on a regular basis. So they're the ones with that experience and expertise and can really help with that. And then once you have the workloads running in the public cloud, obviously you're looking for potential managed services. You may decide to manage them yourselves, in which case an MSP may just do the consulting and the migration for you, and you can take over the service management. But you may well be looking for them to provide service management for you. And where we see this changing and differentiating from a traditional managed service provider is that rather than just focusing on the infrastructure, they're focusing on the full stack. So they should be able to monitor your performances of your databases, performance of your applications, provide insights on the application capabilities and how that's working for the users. And again, there's a lot of tools, a lot of capabilities that they can bring to bear with experience and expertise to really help you understand how those workloads are actually working in the cloud and how they could be as effective and optimized as much as possible. And once you get the workloads into the public cloud, that's not where it stops. There's an opportunity to continuously reevaluate how well each individual workload is running. You might want to change the size of the CPU it's running on. You might want to save some money by using different cost mechanisms and cost benefit mechanisms. So there's some cost optimization. So there's a continuous process, a continuous evaluation of what's running in the public cloud environment once you've got it up and running to make sure that that's running the most effectively, most efficient way and most cost-effective way possible. So when we're talking about planning, you want to be in a position where when you select an MSP, they should be able to offer you and be able to talk to you about all the different services that they put together across the life cycle of the public cloud usage. So if we move on to the next slide, Barry. So the other important area where you can use to evaluate an MSP is the certifications which they can gain. And as Barry said, we've both been working for a while with ISI over 6 years who work with the major public cloud providers, and they have their own accreditation programs. So they will work out what they see as best practice. So what do they see a good functioning MSP should be able to do and deliver to be able to really make effective use of their public cloud platform. So those certifications are in place, and you can see some of those along the bottom. So you know that if you see that badge, you know that that partner has met a certain bar that's been created, evaluated, by an independent company to show that that partner is able to deliver on what they consider to be best practices. So that can be a badge to look for. You can also see certifications from the industry, such as ISO 27000, shows that there's a particular focus on security. Also things like PCI, where they can help you if you're working, for example, in the retail sector, they can help you with your PCI compliance. And then we also see partners and managed service providers specializing in areas such as SQL migration or database migration and performance optimization. We also see you may find you in a position where you're looking for somebody who really focuses on security because that's a key area for you. You might want a partner who can help you modernize your applications. And the managed service providers also focus on specific workloads, so things which are more complex, like ERP or Oracle. How do you migrate those over and make sure that they work as effectively as possible in the cloud? So if you've got specific complex workloads or specific very mission-critical workloads, you may want to look for partners that have that badge that's, again, given by the public cloud platforms to show that they have expertise and experience in managing those workloads and getting them effectively into the cloud. And then we also see MSPs who are focused on some of the newer areas. So if part of your business is looking at things like data analytics or IoT, that again can be looking for partners. There are ways for them to demonstrate that they have expertise and experience in those areas. So the certifications can demonstrate a level of competency because it's a third-party badge, it's an industry independent badge that's given to a partner that's shown and demonstrated that they have expertise and experience in those specific areas. So if those are areas that you're interested in, that can again be another way to think about which partners you might want to select to work with. So if we move on to the next slide, please, Barry. So let's say you're thinking about using a public cloud managed service provider. And how does the engagement really start? So these partners should be in a position where they are the experts in the public cloud platform. So they should really understand it. And those platforms move very quickly. They're launching new capabilities on an almost daily basis. So their job is to keep up with those new capabilities. And they should be able to provide some levels of education and training for you to help you understand the benefits that the public cloud platforms could potentially offer you as a business. And most of the platform providers have come up with their best practices, typically called the cloud adoption frameworks. And what they've done is they've worked with large enterprises, small businesses across the world and distilled what they see as best practices within the development and deployment of services and infrastructure into the cloud. So the 5 main pillars around security, performance, reliability, operations, and cost optimizations. So again, they've distilled what works, they've seen what works, they have that experience, and they can apply those best practices, and they should be able to teach you how those work and how that operates, so you can make the most effective use of the public cloud. You may also be in a position where you need to build up your skill sets around DevOps. What is DevOps? What is an agile approach to project management and delivery of applications? And what are pipelines? And how does all of that work? And what's the benefits of it? And so educating and training you up to really understand how that works and how that can benefit you as a company. And then also with that application modernization, there's lots of talks and interest around containers and functions and microservices and Kubernetes and all of that fast-moving areas where there are some real benefits to be able to have applications that are using that functionality. But again, you may not have that expertise, so looking for a partner who can help you understand that can also be giving you the ability to sort of educate yourself and train up. So looking for partners who can deliver that from a training or a workshop perspective. And then you're looking for a partner who will sit down and understand what you're trying to achieve as a company from a cloud strategy. So what is your strategy for making the most effective use of cloud technologies? What are those business objectives? What are those business drivers that you have? You might, for example, have a data center that you need to relocate from fairly quickly. That might be the driver from a business perspective. You might have some products which are coming to end of life or end of support, and you need to migrate from that to a SaaS service. So they should be able to sit down and have a structured methodology for engaging and discussing and understanding your capabilities, your requirements, your challenges from a business and a technology perspective, mapping that to your business strategy of where you want to go, and then coming up with the appropriate migration roadmap and workload migration to be able to get you to where you want to go. And then also have a discussion with you about your workloads and understand which workloads make sense to move to the cloud, and in which way, which are the most important, based on all of those things. And then what skill sets are you going to need? It's yes, the MSP will be there. Yes, the public cloud platform provider will provide some support, but you're still going to need some understanding about the cloud itself. So what is that knowledge you need to have? And there's a concept called a shared responsibility model, which outlines that, which Barry will go into more detail. But again, the partner should be able to explain those things and use that as a discussion framework, as we'll see. So that's sitting down and first of all, really kind of getting to know you as a customer and understanding your drivers. What are you trying to achieve, and putting together a roadmap plan. So if we then move on to the next phase, Barry. So the next phase from there is to say within the obtain and build. So how are you going to put together the appropriate environment for you to run your workloads in the public cloud? And really there are two separate approaches here. So if you've got no public cloud usage at all, then again, taking your cloud strategy review, taking your technology and business drivers, taking that to the next level and really kind of understanding what skills and resources you're going to need, detailing that shared operating model and really breaking down who is going to be responsible for what in the new model. Workload discovery, they'll typically come in, they'll, if you have a large amount of applications to manage, they'll typically come in, install some kind of analytics tool, leave it running for a few weeks, and that will give them a great deal of information, a wealth of information about what applications you've got running, what their dependencies are, the dependency mapping for what applications need to work with other components, so that they can really make sure that the migration plan is as effective as possible. Obviously, you need to work out the costs and the return on investment, so that, again, should be a part of that discussion. And at high-level designs, and what's the environment going to look like? So you want that landing zone, as it's called, the environment that's created for all of your workloads to go in. There's some best practices around that, and they should be able to, again, discuss and agree that with you. And the outcome out of all of that should be a readiness plan that says, from a migration perspective, are we ready to go, and what should we be moving? And if you're a large enterprise, you may be using things like TOGAF or scalable agiles or frameworks. So having a partner that understands that language and can talk to you about that in that language and insert the public cloud strategy into that overall framework, again, may be something you want to consider. Now, if you're an existing public cloud user, you may have developed and deployed something yourself. It may be great. It may be deployed for a few years. It quite often doesn't keep up with the best practices and the new capabilities that the public cloud platforms are constantly deploying. So again, there are partners who can come in and do what's called a well-architected review. And they'll, again, looking at what you want to achieve from a strategy and what your drivers are, should be able to look at, and there's a structured methodology to go into looking at the key areas around operations and performance, etc., and give you a very detailed recommendations to make sure that you are going to adhere to those best practices, so that you can make sure that what you're doing in the public cloud is secure, is safe, and is using the capabilities as effectively as possible. And then the third area where the partners may be offering services you may be of interest to you is the application modernization. You may have a monolithic application that you've developed internally, it's been around for a while, you want to modernize that application. You might be looking for a partner who's got that expertise and understanding of what you can do to take that application apart and start refactoring it and recreating it as a more modern application that can really make use of the cloud capabilities. So again, looking for application expertise and thinking about the applications and how the applications fit into the overall architecture of the structure, the environment that you're going to deploy that application into. So again, looking for partners that are not just focused like a traditional MSP who are just focused on, I can take some VMs and I can move them into the cloud. We see MSPs really having a strong understanding of applications and really helping customers make the best use out of the public cloud by modernizing their applications or designing net new applications that are designed to run directly on the cloud with all the cloud capabilities. So a couple of areas that, again, Microsoft and AWS and others have put together cloud adoption frameworks and well-architected reviews that are there, which are built on the best practices and what they've learned, and they're all available to you to use, but they're also available for the partners and the MSPs to use. So if they do come to you and talk to you about helping you migrate and set up your workloads in the cloud, they should be talking about the cloud adoption framework, and they should be aligning their practices and their designs and their recommendations based on those. Now, if we go on to the next slide, Darren. And then finally, get into design and transition. So again, this is where you're actually saying, now we know what we want to do. We're going to start migrating and getting ourselves ready to migrate everything over. So cloud migration, again, project management skills. And again, we'll go into more details about what you might be looking for from there. But when they set up a project, you want consulting skills, you want engineering skills, service management, etc. And what's the customer success look like? Again, we see partners really focusing on there and understanding your customer needs and making sure that what they deploy aligns with your business outcomes and your technology outcomes. And that often provides a really good service. And then obviously you then build up a roadmap of cloud adoption based on hybrid cloud. You may not be moving everything over, so how are those workloads going to work together? Translating that high-level design down to low-level designs and then prioritizing that workload. So you should end up with a nice migration plan, probably based in agile-based sprints, of which workloads are going to move when and where, and then start implementing that. And then once they've moved over into the cloud, what's the transition look like to service management? And how do they make sure that what they've delivered is based on, delivers what they said it would? You may also want to be able to have discussions around the cloud operating model. So what does your IT organization need to look like after all of this has happened? What skill sets? What's your responsibilities? If you have a service management desk that users can use, how does that integrate in with a service that the MSPs have? What does the governance and security look like, and how are you going to manage costs? And then again, from an application support, that could be as simple as lift and shift. It could be optimizing applications, it could be migrating to platform as a service for databases, or it could be moving to software as a service, things like Office 365. Virtual desktop has obviously been a very popular one this year. And again, there are some benefits from using the public cloud pay-as-you-go options so that you can offer a much more scalable virtual desktop solution to allow people to work remotely from home. So again, we've seen that rise in popularity, obviously, this year. And so, as I mentioned, the cloud adoption frameworks and well-architected reviews are available for you to use, but again, having a partner that uses this and does this on a daily basis with multiple customers makes them a really good partner to help you basically do this, because they're doing it on a day-to-day basis, whereas you might only have to move one set of workloads into the cloud. They're doing it on a regular basis, so they have that expertise and experience, and you should be able to ask them about what that experience looks like. And if we go into the next phase, Baron. And then once you've got the workloads into the cloud, there's obviously the delivery and support aspect. So on the right-hand side, you can see cloud management functions. This is from Gartner, a number of capabilities expected from a cloud management service. So you want to be able to think about, when you talk to your potential public cloud MSP, which of these functions is he providing? Which ones of those are you going to provide? How would you integrate those things if you're providing some of those functions and they're providing others? Some of the key things you might want to be thinking about is, what's the overall user experience look like for this? So, what sort of dashboard will you be getting? How will you be requesting services? And if you have people who just want to look at the bills, you might want to have dedicated access that only certain people can see. You might want to have the IT organization might want to be able to do pretty much anything they would have been able to do anyway, going straight onto the portal. So you might have different roles and different requirements, different expectations. And you also want to be able to, how are you going to monitor that service? How are you going to make sure the service being delivered is what the MSP said it's going to be? How do you raise tickets? How do you track those tickets? All of those traditional sort of MSP functions that have always been in existence. And security and governance is a key area which Barry is going to talk about more. And then you might also want to have the developers have direct access via API and programmatic access to the public cloud platform, but you still want to put some governance around that. So what is all that going to look like? So they give you a feel for some of the things you want to be thinking about of what this service is going to look like once it's deployed into the public cloud. Okay, Barry, this next slide. So just to kind of finish off this section, just some ideas of things you might want to be thinking about from the MSP. What might you be looking for from them? So what sort of educational training can they provide to get you up to speed? How are they going to make sure that once they've defined what your roles and responsibilities are versus theirs versus the public cloud platform, how are they going to help upskill your capabilities? Do they have experience in the particular specialist workloads you care about, or the industry or verticals you work in? What sort of certifications do they have? And what's their complete lifecycle services that they've got set up across the entire sort of engagement, design, deploy, deliver, and support? And once you've got everything running, what's visibility? How are they going to make sure that they are delivering the services they said they're going to? What sort of SLAs are they putting in place, and how are they going to demonstrate that they're meeting all of those capabilities? And what sort of account, what sort of technical support structure you're going to have, what sort of customer success management is in place. So just give you a feel for some of those things that you might want to be thinking about when you assess that MSP's capabilities. Yeah, so hopefully that kind of gives you a feel for the different key areas at a kind of broad brush of the capabilities that we'd expect a public cloud MSP to offer. So I'm now going to hand over to Barry, who's going to be talking a little bit more about some of those key areas in more detail.
Thank you, David. So the first area we'll look at is cost management. And there are 4 broad buckets of costs that you need to be assessing and monitoring and planning for when you look to migrate to the cloud. The first of those cost buckets is the cost of the migration processes. So when you move a workload from wherever it is, on-prem, in hosted, or in another cloud provider, into a public cloud vendor, that process itself incurs some costs. So you've got the strategy and planning that David talked about, the design of the workload and the deployment costs, the migration costs, which, and by migration costs I mean the costs of physically moving or should I say virtually moving the workload from A to B. And then finally the decommissioning costs of existing capacity. So if you're already in a cloud environment, that will be fairly low. But if you're moving from an on-prem data center into one of the 4 main cloud vendors, you could well be left with a bunch of hardware and even premises that you need to repurpose or dispose of. The second bunch of costs to think about are consumption costs. So all of the cloud vendors provide a number of different charging models. The most common one is pay-as-you-go. So this is where we get the term consumption costs for. As soon as you start using their services, then you are incurring costs, and that we call that the consumption costs. There's lots of models and reporting tools that are available to enable you to monitor that and measure it, but it is one area that you do need to keep a really careful eye on and work to a budget, because it's an area that often gives people new to the cloud areas of concern and panic as they see the costs escalating. But with the right controls in place and the right partner supporting you, that can be easily avoided. The third bucket is management and operational costs. So these cover the managed service fees, any additional support fees that you may require, additional professional services fees, and by that I mean often within the managed service level agreement and standard statement of work, you are able to negotiate a period of professional services. It might be half a day a month, it might be 5 days a month, or per quarter, but that gives you access to technical expertise within the package you've negotiated. There's cost of governance and reporting. All of the cloud vendors provide their own native tools for cost management. There are, however, a series of third-party tools that arguably give you a much more granular and much more value in terms of the reporting of the data, but they do come with an overhead that you need to be aware of, and also cost of optimization. So one of the big differences between a traditional architecture and a public cloud architecture is the speed with which it changes. So when putting together managed services in a traditional environment, we think about a four-stage cycle of plan, design, implement, and operate. And anyone involved with delivery of managed services will be very familiar with that cycle. In the public cloud, we add a fifth phase, which is optimize. And the reason we add optimize is twofold. First of all, the amount of data that is made available to you from the monitoring and logging utilities within the cloud gives you lots of information that means you're able to then change the design and tweak the design. Because you're no longer burdened with a bunch of hardware that you can't just sort of drop and throw away, and you're able to make changes quickly and easily with very little cost. That data you get from the optimization from the cloud vendor enables you to continually tweak the architecture of workloads and improve the performance and also the cost performance. The second thing that drives that fifth phase of optimization is changes from the cloud vendors. I mean, last time I counted, which was about 18 months ago, Microsoft and AWS between them were launching about 2,500 new features and services into the market every year. And what that means for you as a user is that when you move a workload into the cloud now, you can almost guarantee that over the next 6 months there will be some form of new feature or new instance size that means you can change the architecture and probably either improve performance or reduce the cost. And then the final bucket is the internal cost of migration. So once you've moved your workload from wherever into the public cloud, you also have that internal cost. So you will have an internal team managing the process. You may have cost of staff reallocation. Typically that can free up staff time to focus on the more strategic elements of IT, and also current license obligations. So they, that will vary from vendor to vendor, but it's a critical element of managing costs moving forward. The business case that you put together needs to cover all of those 4 buckets, assess the financial and non-financial benefits, and then also assess the risk of migrating. So cloud MSPs, and I'm not going to talk you through all the detail on here. We'll just look at the high level points. So the cloud MSPs have 4 different pricing models that they use with clients, and as a potential client you simply need to be aware of those different pricing models. Any single MSP can be using 1 or all 4 of them at any one time, depending on their flexibility and approach. So the first model they'll use for charging for managed, and the pricing models here I'm talking about are the price, how the MSP charges for the managed service. So the first model is a percentage of the cloud consumption fees. So if your consumption bill is £1,000 per month, then the MSP will look to charge you a percentage of that on top of the £1,000 for providing the managed service. The second model is fee per object. So if you've got a 50 virtual machines in there, 50 instances that the MSP is managing for you, then they will charge you a fee per object or a fee per storage object that's agreed with you up front and should be defined within the contract. The third model, which is I've only seen a couple of times, is activity-based costing. I have worked with a couple of partners who price up their contracts based on the data they have for activities. The advantage of that, it does give you a fairly accurate, gives both the MSP and yourself an accurate figure to work with. The disadvantage is that there are very few partners with that level of and confidence in the data they have. And then the fourth model is where a partner will provide a fixed price for an application workload. The big advantage for this is the fact that it takes away your risk on the consumption costs and transfers that to the partner. So rather than charging you the consumption costs and a managed service fee, and then you manage the variability in any consumption costs, the partner says, we will charge you £1,500 per month for managing this application and manage the risk. The 2 most common models are the first and second one, and please feel free when you're working and engaging with an MSP to talk about which charging model they use and which is best suited to the application that you're discussing. When it comes to professional services, again, there's 4 different models that partners will use for charging their fees. And all this information that I'm presenting on the last slide and this slide is based on my observations and working with MSPs over the course of the last 2 years. So the first model is time and material, where they just provide you with a body and charge you for time. You take the risk of how long that time will be. The second model is a fee for a defined standard of work, statement of work. So you agree with the partner the work to be achieved, they deliver against that specification and do that for a defined price. The third model is a fee for productized service. So there are a number of MSPs around on the market operating in the UK now who will provide you, for example, migration services for a fixed fee. So they will say to you, if you are migrating a workload that has 2 databases and 6 virtual machines, we will do that for a fixed fee. And that typically that's just a straight lift and shift operation where they copy the application as it is in the on-prem and move it into the cloud. But it does provide you with a low risk and cost-effective manner of migrating to the cloud of your choice. And then the fourth model is bundle professional services time, where the partner will bundle in include an amount of professional services time within their statement of work or within their managed service agreement. And typically what we see here is providing you access to technical support on a set number of days per month or per quarter, dependent on what you feel the need will be. So how do you assess the MSP's approach to cost management? First one is look at their assessment and planning. Ask the question, how is cost management and optimization designed in? What tools does the partner use? I mentioned there's 2 broad sets of tools. There's vendor supported ones and third party. What type of governance and reporting will they provide it? So asset management, consumption reporting and budget management. The third area to look at is their approach to optimization. So will they provide asset optimization and architectural? So asset optimization is where you look at the assets that are being used and are able to modify them or delete them depending on the level of usage. And the architectural optimization is where you may change the design of a workload based on the additional data you've now got, or maybe on the new services that have been made available by the cloud vendor. The next area to discuss with them is the type of contracts. Make sure the pricing model is clearly defined. Ask them about license management. Right? This is particularly relevant when you are working, if you've got a big investment in licenses from Microsoft or Oracle or one of the other data, someone like Teradata, the other database providers, and please take time to ensure that license investment you've made is transferred in a cost-effective way into the cloud. And several of the cloud vendors have programs that enable you to do that. So please ask about that. And finally, talk with them about what pricing model will be used and ask how does that optimize your cost. So let's now look at security. So we've got here a list of 11 different security risks as reported by CSO Online. I want that some of them will be very common to on-prem and cloud, so things like data breaches can occur wherever. Others like misconfiguration and inadequate change control, insufficient identity, credential access and key management, lack of cloud security are much more cloud specific. In particular, item number 7, insecure interfaces and APIs. When you move workloads into the cloud, you will probably be using a broader range of interfaces and APIs, and it's easy to slip up on the security there. So you need to be working with a partner who understands these areas. The first step is the shared responsibility model. So this slide is taken from the Center for Internet Security in the US. It's publicly available. And the shared responsibility model has been endorsed by all of the cloud vendors. And basically, the intention is for you, the user, to ensure that the security of your data is shared between the cloud vendor and yourself. And when you work with a cloud MSP or a cloud consultant, then that responsibility becomes shared 3 ways. I won't run through the detail of this, but when you move to the cloud, you do need to be aware that you have a large responsibility for ensuring that you're delivering against your responsibilities of securing the elements that you're accountable for. There are 5 broad aspects of cloud security for you to talk about when you discuss security with your provider. So, and these 5 buckets of topics are based on the AWS well-architected framework. The first one is identity and access management. The second is forensic controls, and this means your ability to tag and log assets and understand and track all activity, so that when you do have an incident, you can quickly and easily identify the vulnerability and take action. The third bucket is infrastructure for protection. This area is relatively similar to what you would do on-prem. You know, the use of firewalls, the use of VPNs when transiting data, the design of your network to minimize access to the internet. Data and application protection is how you protect the data from either malicious or accidental damage. So this includes things like encryption at rest, which is particularly important with personal identification information and other sensitive information, encryption in transit, backup and restore capabilities. And then the 5th bucket is incident management. So how will your MSP, when you do have a security incident, and you will have security incidents, how does the MSP handle them? What processes and capabilities do they have in place to handle them? The thing I'd like to emphasize is the line at the bottom, which you know is one of David's great points, and this is this security process for cloud kicks off in the discovery phases, and that includes asking you as a client about your security processes and priorities and what risks you see. And then designing security into the workload design from day one. In terms of how to assess an MSP's approach to security, there's a bunch of questions here. I'm not going to go through these in detail because I am aware of the time. The one I'd draw your attention to the most is the one on the bottom right hand side highlighted in red, and that's who initiates the security discussion. So if you're discussing migrating a workload with an MSP or a cloud consultant and they haven't asked you about security, if you have to bring up the topic of security, I would suggest you're probably talking to the wrong organization. The security discussion should be there from the very start of the engagement and top of mind for both yourself and also the potential partner that you're working with. Yeah,
so before we go into managing risk, maybe we could put up the second poll, which was really looking for, well, we'll wait for the question to come up. So we've talked about, you know, the different areas of the life cycle of services. So engaging, education, helping you understand how public cloud can work, designing services, more expertise and understanding of design and transition, or more delivery and support capabilities. So out of the life cycle of services, you know, have you looked at public cloud MSPs, and where do you see the biggest gaps for them? Would it be in the planning phase to really have a good portfolio of services? Is it engaging and helping you understand the capabilities from public cloud, or is it in the migration, or not a wide enough range of support capabilities from a managed service perspective? So
they're obviously giving thought to this, voting slightly slower, but we're just coming up to 60% have responded.
Okay.
I can tell you it's a very close race between the first two at the moment.
Okay.
Okay, so we're over 70% voted, so I think we could safely call that a result. I'll just put up on the screen. There you go. Plan just edged ahead in the final few votes there. Okay,
so it's really kind of helping you understand how you can use public cloud more effectively. I think really having a portfolio of services and helping engage. So yeah, that's very interesting. So thanks for the response.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's intriguing, and hopefully we get a chance to discuss that once we get to the end of the slides. So in terms of risk, there are 5 areas of risk for you to think about: business risk, technical risk, operational risk, information security risk, and staff risk. And then within the business and commercial risk area, I've broken that down into a little bit more detail. So the first is cost, and we see lots of stories of organisations that move workloads into the cloud and then see cost escalate rather than the expected cost reduction. And the reason for that is usually lack of governance and poor design. But you need to be aware that the risk is there and work with partners that can manage that. Contractual risk, and I'll come on to some contractual details to think about in the next couple of slides. MSP and cloud vendor financial health, probably less important for if you're working with one of the big cloud vendors. I think the financial health is less of an aspect to be concerned about, but certainly with MSPs you need to be confident that you're choosing someone that is viable and will be there for the long term for you. And then also use of third party for service delivery. You can't just assume because an MSP appears to have the capability they're talking about that it all sits within house. So do check that they are delivering the services and are not reliant on a third party, or if they are reliant on a third party, they're being open and explicit with you about that. When we look at the contract, there are a number of areas where cloud contracts with MSPs start to vary from a standard managed service contract. So the first, on the left-hand side of the slide, the first piece is to make sure within the contract you sign, your data ownership is clearly specified. It's your data. Just because the MSP or the consultant is moving it into AWS or Azure and managing it for you, it's your data, you own it. Is the termination and handoff process clearly defined? The professional MSPs will have this clear in the documentation. One of the downsides of there is always a risk in a business relationship. It doesn't work for one partner or other. If your business assets are critical and tied up in a cloud, and you decide you need to move the management of that from partner 1 to partner 2, then the contracts really should cover that and define how that will be done. And the accredited partners will, David talked about earlier, will typically have that a contract that defines that type of process. Is the method and time period for the storage of security and other logs specified? Might not be important for you in the market you are, but some vertical markets such as finance, the storage and access of security and other logs can be critical for you. So make sure that that is contained within the contract. And then the pricing model. You want to know precisely what you'll be paying for, how you'll be paying for it, and how that pricing is governed. Within the SLA, look for things like response times, priority and severity levels, application availability, performance and RPO, RTO times, remediation times, business value SLA. This is very much a cloud specific area. My favorite example of this is a client of ISSI in Australia that provides a workload to a retail company down in Australia, and their SLA for the performance of that managed service is based on how the app gets the feedback for the app in the App Store. And the reason for that is the end client has found they sell more product the higher the rating of the app in the App Store, and the rating of the app in the App Store is largely about how easy and responsive it is. So that shares the SLA there, and that style of SLA is still relatively rare and may not be relevant for what you want to do, but it has value for both parties. And then finally, implementation times for service requests. If part of the contract is they're going to be the MSP will be implementing service requests and changes, then please do ask for times and timescales for those to be delivered. So when you're looking at how to assess the MSP's approach to risk management, I suggest that you look at 4 areas. The first question to ask on the right hand side is what risk do they see in the project, and how will that risk be managed? The next is what project management processes do they have? The reason you ask about the project management process is that the primary tool for managing risk within the process. If the partner is using agile methodologies such as Scrum or Kanban, then ask how they manage risk in that process, and how do they include it in the product backlog. And then finally, ask about the types of project managers they'll be working with. If they're certified project managers, either Prince2 or PMP, both certifications include an abundance of risk management tools, so that you can be confident that the individual will have the right skills and processes to work with you. So we have included here a decision framework. This is very high level, and it's just designed as a thinking tool for you to understand how to approach to assess and evaluate a managed service partner. So finally, what questions do you have?
Oh, that's a very long question just arrived there. While I'm digesting the long question,
I'll let David take that one there. Whilst I grab a drink of water.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Barry. Yeah.
So that's probably very wise. Now, the first observation was from Malcolm Newman, who it's an observation rather than a question. He says the certifications page did not reference 20,000 2018, which is the latest version, which I assume is just an observation. Okay,
yeah, no, it's fair. It's really, yeah. I mean, we didn't cover things like 27,080, which is, PII for the cloud. The 20,000, they're meant to be examples, really. So there may well be not the latest up-to-date ones, but the idea is that if you have a 27,000 certification, A, you want to make sure it's current. B, you want to make sure that it covers and scopes the business, part of the business that you're focusing on. You do get some partners who have multiple parts of the business, and the 27,000 or the 20,000 doesn't cover the particular cloud business you're interested in. And so, yes, you want to make sure it's up to date and it's based on the current current certifications and industry standards that exist. So, yeah.
Okay. There's one other short question I can read out before I get to the long one, which is, what is the frequency of people changing map? I'm not sure I understood the question myself.
People changing map.
Michael, maybe you need to give us a bit more explanation on your question.
I would suggest that's MSP.
MSP, yeah. That makes sense.
So let me feel that one, David, and give you for a long one. So that varies enormously. I've worked with, in some of the Western European countries, I've worked with several partners, and you see the same customers across a number of partners. Typically, when a workload is moved from MSP1 to MSP2, it's because the relationship has broken down, or because the MSP1 hasn't got the skills to deal with the complexity that the workload requires. Mm-hmm. So if you're at the point where you feel you need to move a workload from MSP1 to MSP2, my suggestion initially would, if you have a relationship with the cloud vendor, would be to talk to your account manager and request some help in that movement. Mm-hmm. The second suggestion would be that you clearly understand the reasons for moving, the reasons for the failure, and are able to safeguard those when you make the decisions about who will be MSP2.
Yeah, and I think further to that, where we also see, I've seen partners, sometimes there are partners who specialize in certain workloads, and that's what they focused on. So a company will use that partner just to do that workload, but then there's like a handover transition to, there's the preferred main MSP that does everything for them. So sometimes you need to manage that relationship as well to make sure, because if an MSP is going to manage a workload, they usually want to have designed it and developed it themselves, especially if they're putting SLAs around it. So if you will have a specialist sort of boutique sort of consulting company that's looking at specific workloads or specialized areas, that handover process can be tricky as well. So it's something to watch out for.
Okay, so let's tackle the long one. Thank you, David Carpenter, for the longest question I've had to read out, I think. I will do my best to I'll do my best to intonate it on your behalf. This is David speaking. I've heard a number of horror stories regarding access to forensic data after data breaches, where the CSP/MSP has been recalcitrant regarding access to logs and other data, even going as far as having to get a court order to compel access. How do you include suitable access to metadata, log data, etc., to ensure a chain of custody and audit trail is provided post-event. Does this have a major cost implication not mentioned in your models as such?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll cover that. I'll cover that, David.
Right.
Yeah, so when I talked about security and contracts, I touched on the subject of the storage and access to security logs. So the first critical piece is, and my message on that slide was to make sure that that is captured and defined within the contract. So the first piece of advice I would offer is exactly that access and storage of logs needs to be specified. So that's and certainly the partners that we work with on the cloud vendor programs would all have that type of capability within their contracts. The second piece of advice I would provide there around the cost is that when you design the initial setup of the cloud account, that should really, the best practice defines that the log storage is included within what we call the landing zone, and is separate to the main account with limited access for security reasons, but it should be explicit within the landing zone that where the storage of logs is and who has availability to access it. Was there anything you'd like to add to that, David?
No, the second bit was I was going to talk about, but as you mentioned, the best practices have a dedicated area that they'll usually have some kind of security specialist group. As a lot of MSPs have a security area of specialization, which I kind of mentioned in one of the slides, and yeah, so that they would be putting the logs in an encrypted, separate, highly secure area, which only a few people can get access to, and you as the owner of that data should have access to that at all times. And then that information is used to basically to analyze security events and incidents after the event. So.
Okay, thank you. A further question now. This one's from Carol. Which areas of IT seem to be most reluctant to switching to MSP from more standard hardware-based data storage and security? And the opposite to that, which IT branches switch most commonly?
Okay. So I think the public sector obviously tends to be fairly traditional, tends to be fairly conservative. They have a lot of due process to go through. So there are areas within the public sector that tend to be a little bit slower in terms of, or more reluctant to move. Having said that, I think there's some great initiatives, and there are partners who are specialize in that area. They're on G Cloud, and they offer some great services. So there are also some very innovative areas within public sector who are really using those capabilities to be effective and deliver those kind of digital solutions, which we've all started seeing. So I think from that perspective, public sector is kind of an interesting area. I see areas like manufacturing are very interested in things like IoT and being able to deliver capabilities around sort of distributed intelligence, and also see that in some of the utilities. So that's kind of driving a real interest in that, from looking for particular applications and workloads. And then I think from a general reluctance within IT, I think it's usually, I think some of the large organisations who are used to doing things in their own certain way, they'll use public cloud in certain areas, but they also want to be able to maintain control for themselves. So, Barry, if you've got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would find it difficult to identify a particular area of IT that is reluctant to migrate to cloud. a pattern that I've seen, I've worked with a number of partners over a period of years, and the pattern I've seen there is in year one, they'll present as part of the audit process. When David himself are working with these MSPs, they need to present case study material to demonstrate their capabilities. So in year one, they'll present a case study about customer A, and the application they've moved or the workload they've moved to the cloud will be a relatively simple one. In year two, again, you'll see the same customer but a different workload, and it will be more complex. By year three, that client's confidence in public cloud has grown, and by year three, you're probably starting to see examples of mission critical work being moved into the cloud. So I worked with a partner in France who had a client on who was a manufactured retail items that were sold largely in France, and fitted that pattern exactly. Year one, it was about an informational website. Year two was about the e-commerce site. By the time I got there in year three, the client's confidence had grown to the point that the project that was used as a case study was moving the operating processes for the factory into the particular cloud vendor I was there representing. So, and that's a pattern we see repeated time and time again across multiple countries.
Okay, well, thank you. There's no further question or comment come in, so I suspect it might be a good time to wrap up. I have to say a big thank you to Barry and David. That's been a very interesting and deep, detailed look at the subject area. Remember, everybody, we will be sharing the recording and the slides. So in terms of the depth of that detail, please do revisit the slides and read the full detail there, which the guys have made available. And presumably there are some contact details on the slide pack.
There are.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Moving forward, yeah. There's some references as well, so. So everybody, please take another look through the slide pack when you can, and by all means get in touch with Barry and David if there's anything you'd like to talk over. So thank you all for watching the presentation with us. I thought it was excellent, and hopefully we'll see you all again soon. But for now, I think it's time to head off for our after presentation food and refreshments, which unfortunately these days you have to supply yourselves. Thank you very much, everybody. See you next time. Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.